There is an island on Earth, roughly the size of Manhattan, that no outsider is allowed to set foot on. Not tourists, not scientists, not the government that technically owns it, because the people who live there will kill you. They have lived on this island for tens of thousands of years, long before the pyramids, before writing, before almost everything we call history. They have never joined the modern world. They do not want to, and anyone who comes too close is met with a wall of arrows. In 2018, a young American walked onto their beach to convert them. He never came back. In 2025, another outsider left them a can of Diet Coke and was arrested for it. Approaching this island is illegal, and it can be fatal. Who are these people who have refused the entire modern world? Why do they attack every stranger on sight? And why does a government protect their right to do exactly that? Stay with me. This is the story of the last truly free people on Earth and the island the world is forbidden to touch. Find a map of the Bay of Bengal in the Indian Ocean and look for the Andaman Islands. They belong to India, a scatter of tropical land far off the coast, and among them, sitting slightly apart, is a small, densely forested island ringed by coral reef, North Sentinel. From the air, it looks like paradise. White sand, turquoise water, an unbroken canopy of jungle covering almost the entire island. There are no roads, no buildings, no cleared land. From above, there is almost no visible sign that anyone lives there at all. But they do. And they have made one thing perfectly clear across centuries: stay away. North Sentinel is one of the only places left on the planet that is essentially closed to the outside world, and not by accident. The Indian government has drawn an exclusion zone around the entire island. By law, no one is permitted to go within 5 kilometers, about 3 miles, of its shores. The Navy patrols the waters. Fishing boats are warned off. To even approach is a crime. Think about how strange that is in the modern world. We have mapped the deepest oceans. We have photographed the surface of Mars. There is satellite imagery of nearly every square meter of land on Earth. And yet, here, on a small island, a short boat ride from a populated coast, is a place we are legally forbidden to enter, inhabited by people we cannot speak to, whose language we do not understand, whose numbers we cannot even count. The reef that surrounds the island makes it hard to land. The jungle makes it impossible to see inside. But the real barrier is not the coral or the trees. It is the people themselves. Because every recorded attempt to make contact with North Sentinel has run into the same answer, delivered with bows and arrows from the tree line. We are not welcome here. To understand why, you have to understand just how old their story is. Because the people of this island may be one of the last living links to who all of us once were. The people of North Sentinel are called the Sentinelese, and they are, by most measures, the most isolated human society on Earth. No one knows exactly how long they have been there, but the evidence points to something staggering. The Sentinelese are believed to be direct descendants of some of the very first humans to leave Africa tens of thousands of years ago, people who spread east along the coasts of Asia in one of humanity's earliest great migrations. Some estimates suggest their ancestors may have reached these islands as long as 60,000 years ago. Let that number settle. For most of that time, while the rest of humanity invented farming, cities, empires, religions, machines, and the internet, the Sentinelese simply kept living on the same island, in much the same way, hunting, fishing, gathering, using tools of wood, stone, and bone. They fashion bows nearly as tall as a person, and tipped their arrows with iron salvaged from the wrecks on their reefs, hammering the cold metal into blades with no forge and no fire needed. They build narrow outrigger canoes and pole them through the shallow lagoon, rarely venturing into deep water. It is a way of life refined over a span of time almost impossible to imagine. We know almost nothing about the details of their world. We do not understand their language. It appears unrelated to any other. Even the languages of neighboring islands, a sign of how long they have been apart. We do not know their beliefs, their names, their stories. We do not even know how many of them there are. The estimates range from perhaps 50 people to a few hundred, based mostly on glimpses from boats and the size of the island. In the year 2001, an official Indian census recorded just 39 individuals, 21 men and 18 women, but that was only who happened to be seen. The truth is, no one has ever counted them because no one is allowed to try. And here is what makes them so extraordinary. It is not just that they are isolated, it is that they have chosen it. Again and again, over centuries, the outside world has come to their shores with gifts, with curiosity, with force. And again, the Sentinelese have sent it away. They are not a people waiting to be discovered. They were never lost. They know the outside world exists. They have simply decided with total consistency that they want no part of it. But the outside world has not always respected that decision. And the first time it came not with gifts, but with a kidnapping. The first serious intrusion came in 1880. The Andaman Islands were under British colonial rule, and a young officer named Maurice Portman decided to make contact with North Sentinel. His method was brutal. He landed with an armed party, and he kidnapped 6 of the islanders, an elderly couple and 4 children, and carried them back to the colonial capital. It went horribly. In the outside world, with no immunity to outside diseases, the elderly couple quickly fell ill and died. Frightened that the children would follow, Portman returned them to the island, along with gifts. But the damage may have been far greater than anyone understood. Those children were sent back into their community, possibly carrying the very diseases that had just killed the elders. It is likely that the Sentinelese learned a lesson in 1880 that they have never forgotten. The outsiders bring death. For most of the 20th century, the island was left largely alone. Then, in the 1960s, India began a careful series of contact expeditions. Leading them over decades was an anthropologist named Triloknath Pandit. He first landed on the island in 1967 to find abandoned huts and no people. And for the next 24 years, he returned again and again, leaving gifts on the beach, coconuts, bananas, metal tools. Often, he was met with arrows. And then, one morning, something happened that had never happened before. On the 4th of January 1991, Pandit's team approached the beach in small boats, tossing coconuts into the shallow water. Around 24 Sentinelese came down to the shoreline. One man raised his bow and aimed it at the boats, and then a Sentinelese woman stepped forward and pushed the man's bow down toward the sand. He lowered the weapon. He buried it. And for the first time in recorded history, the Sentinelese waded out to the boats and took the coconuts directly from the outsiders' hands. It was a breakthrough that anthropologists had waited a century for. Peaceful contact on the Sentinelese's own terms. But it did not last. The visits were occasional, tense, and brief. And within a few years, India made a profound decision to stop trying. The contact expeditions were ended. The new policy was simple: leave them alone, because everyone involved had begun to understand a terrible truth. that the friendliest possible contact might still be the most dangerous thing in the world for the Sentinelese. Leaving them alone, however, has never been something the outside world is good at. In 1981, a cargo ship called the Primrose ran aground on the reef off North Sentinel. Within days, the crew looked up to see dozens of Sentinelese gathering on the shore, building bows and arrows, and preparing to reach the ship. The captain sent a frantic radio message begging for weapons to be airdropped, describing armed islanders who might attack at any moment. For days, the sailors sheltered inside the steel hull as arrows came, until an Indian Navy helicopter finally lifted them to safety. The Sentinelese, ever resourceful, later stripped metal from the wreck to tip their arrows. That rusting ship still sits on the reef today, a monument to the island's refusal. In 2006, 2 Indian fishermen were poaching crab in the waters off North Sentinel. At night, their boat drifted too close to the island. In the morning, the Sentinelese came. Both men were killed. When a helicopter tried to recover the bodies, it was driven back by arrows. The bodies were never retrieved. But the incident that made North Sentinel known around the world came in 2018. A 26-year-old American named John Allen Chow was a devout evangelical Christian, and he had become fixated on a single mission: to reach the Sentinelese and convert them to his faith. He knew it was illegal. He knew it was dangerous. He paid fishermen to take him close under cover of night, and he made his way toward the island in a kayak. On his first approaches, he tried to call out to offer gifts. The Sentinelese responded as they always had. At one point, an arrow struck the Bible he was holding. He retreated, wrote in his journal, and prepared to try again. On the 16th of November 2018, he had the fishermen drop him at the island one final time and told them to leave without him. He was never seen alive again. From their boat, the fishermen later watched the Sentinelese drag his body along the beach and bury it in the sand. His remains were never recovered, because to go and get them would mean risking more lives and more intrusion on a people who had made their answer perfectly clear. Chow's death became a global story, and it forced an uncomfortable question. Was this murder? Or was it a people defending their home exactly as they had told the world they would for over a century? And still, they keep coming. As recently as 2025, another outsider, a young American filming for social media, landed briefly on the beach, blew a whistle to try to draw the Sentinelese out, and left behind an offering that captured the absurdity of the whole thing: a single can of Diet Coke and a coconut on the shore of the most isolated society on Earth. He was arrested and now faces years in prison. Every one of these people believed they had a reason to cross the line, and every time, the line has held. But the reason India guards that line so fiercely has almost nothing to do with punishing outsiders. It has to do with protecting the islanders from something they cannot see and cannot fight. Here is the truth at the heart of North Sentinel. The greatest threat to the Sentinelese is not an arrow. It is a handshake. The Sentinelese have lived in isolation for so long that their bodies have almost no immunity to the diseases the rest of us carry without a second thought. A common cold, the flu, measles. To us, an inconvenience. To them, potentially an extinction event. A single sick visitor could, in theory, wipe out the entire population in a matter of weeks, the same way isolated peoples across history have been devastated, again and again, by illnesses they had never encountered. You do not have to look far for the proof. On the very same island chain lived another people, the Great Andamanese. When the British arrived in the 19th century, they numbered in the thousands. Then came contact, colonization, alcohol, and above all, disease. Within a few generations, they were almost gone. By 1901, just over 600 remained. Today, the Great Andamanese number only a few dozen people in total. That is what contact did to the Sentinelese's closest neighbors. It is the exact fate the 5-kilometer line exists to prevent. This is why the law exists. India's protection of North Sentinel, first written in 1956, is not about keeping a curiosity in a cage. It is about keeping a fragile people alive. The 5-kilometer exclusion zone, the naval patrols, the refusal to retrieve even the bodies of the dead, all of it flows from a hard lesson learned across the colonial centuries. That contact, however well-meaning, tends to kill uncontacted peoples, not with malice, with microbes. And there is a second principle, quieter but just as important: the right of a people to be left alone. The Sentinelese have never asked to be studied, saved, converted, or civilized. They have expressed their wishes with total clarity for as long as we have records. To force ourselves upon them, even in kindness, is to decide that we know better than they do how they should live. There is one moment that captures the strength of these people better than any other. When the great tsunami of 2004 struck the Indian Ocean, killing hundreds of thousands across the region, North Sentinel was directly in its path. The earthquake was so powerful, it lifted the entire island upward by around 2 meters, exposing the surrounding reef. Many feared the Sentinelese had been wiped out. Days later, a helicopter flew low over the island to check, and out of the trees, a lone Sentinelese man stepped onto the beach and fired an arrow up at the aircraft. They had survived. Ancient knowledge, passed down over countless generations, had almost certainly sent them fleeing to high ground before the waves came. They did not need to be rescued. They needed, as always, to be left alone. Which brings us to the deepest question this island asks. Not about them, but about us. It is easy to look at North Sentinel and see a people frozen in the past, a window into the Stone Age, drifting on in the middle of a connected world. But look a little longer and the picture inverts. Because the Sentinelese are not the ones who are trapped. We are the ones who cannot leave them alone. For 60,000 years, humans lived roughly the way the Sentinelese still live. In small bands, close to the land, without cities or states or machines. That was not a brief prehistoric prelude. That was almost the entire story of our species. The world of highways and screens and borders that feels so permanent to us is, on the timescale of humanity, brand new. The Sentinelese are not a relic of who we were. They are one of the last living pieces of it. And they have done something almost no one else on Earth has managed. They have said no. No to trade. No to religion. No to technology. No to the entire overwhelming tide of the modern world that has swept up every other society on the planet. They looked at everything we have to offer, and they turned it down. And they have made that refusal stick for longer than any nation on Earth has existed. If you've come this far with me, take a moment and subscribe. And come explore the world with us every week, the places at the very edge of the map and the people who guard them. That is the whole reason this channel exists. Because North Sentinel is not really a story about a hostile tribe. It is a story about freedom in its rarest, most absolute form. A people who owe nothing to anyone, answer to no government, follow no outside law, and want nothing that we have. In a world where almost every corner has been mapped, monetized, and connected, They remain genuinely, completely free. And the last thing that freedom asks of us is also the hardest thing for us to give. Return, one last time, to that beach. Picture it from a boat, at the edge of the exclusion zone, as close as the law allows. White sand, a wall of green behind it. And somewhere in those trees, a few dozen people who have watched our ships pass for generations, who have seen our aircraft cross their sky, who know in some way that a vast and strange world surrounds their small island, and who have decided over and over that they do not want it. We tend to assume that everyone deep down wants what we have: comfort, medicine, connection, progress. The Sentinelese are a standing challenge to that assumption. They are proof that a people can look at all of it and simply say, no thank you. Their island is not a prison. The bars, if there are any, are the ones we keep trying to put around them. Our missionaries, our cameras, our coconuts and cans of soda, our endless need to reach the one place that has told us unmistakably to keep away. Everything about their story unsettles us because it reverses the roles we are used to. We are not the explorers here, and they are not the ones to be discovered. On North Sentinel, we are the intruders. And the kindest, wisest, most advanced thing the entire modern world has managed to do for them is also the simplest: to leave the island alone, to let them be. The arrows will keep coming for anyone who crosses that line, not out of savagery, but out of a choice, the oldest and most human choice of all, the choice of a people to remain themselves on their own island, in their own world, for as long as they possibly can. If this stayed with you, do 3 things. Subscribe so you do not miss where we go next. Share this with 5 people who think everywhere has already been discovered. And tell me in the comments, do you think the world should leave North Sentinel alone or not? Then tell me where we should go next. Somewhere remote, somewhere extraordinary, somewhere the map still goes quiet. We will be there. Until then, keep exploring.